You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are doing part 2 of our review of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. We are actually recording this at the same time as the first part, so I'm not going to do a complete recap of all of that. I'm not even going to ask Keely how her week was, because we talked about that the first time. I know how Keely's week was. But just very, very quickly, if you are for some reason finding this episode first out of all of our episodes, this book is like the book 4 of the ACOTAR series, so you really don't want to start here, but you are more than welcome to listen to us spoil this. If this book does contain a lot of triggers, we listed them all in the first episode. Just briefly, like some of them are like abuse, suicidal ideation, like murder. There is a lot of rape, sexual assault. There's lots of sexual content in this book. So if any of those things are triggers to you, I just want to highlight that. I keep it pretty PG-13s, but, you know, if you're reading the book or if you want to read the book, then you would want to know that ahead of time. But we're just going to go right into it because it is a very, very long book. So, yeah. All right. So we're picking right back up. So where we ended off at in episode 1, Nesta had just done the worst thing that Nesta could possibly do. Nesta had just dropped the bomb on Feyre that her baby, because her baby has wings, when she delivers her baby, she most likely will die. And her mate, Reese, and everyone was keeping that from her because no one wanted to tell her that she was going to die. But Nesta was only telling her that out of spite because she had found out that basically they all had a conversation about Nesta's powers and what they should and should not tell Nesta. So she basically was like, well, if you can do that, I can do that too. And so she really broke Feyre's heart. And so Reese told Cassian to get her out of the city before he killed her. So that's what Cassian did. And Cassian is he's pretty pissed. So they landed like out in this, I don't know, like wilderness or whatever. And he lets her sleep, but then he wakes her up the next morning and he gives her like mushrooms and toast. No, thank you. And he's basically like, we're gonna be hiking, because he tells Feyre like, I'm gonna keep her out here a couple of days. We're gonna hike, and she's like, oh, she'll hate that. And he's like, good, she should. So he makes her carry the pack. It's like 50 pounds. He makes her carry all of their like luggage supplies, and she just like is like walking behind him for like 6 hours at a time, thinking about like, I just want to fall over. I would be miserable. Cassian, while they're out there walking, he just can't believe how much Nesta just wants to die. Like, he can't, like, I mean, Nesta is, like, suicidal at this point. Like, she just does not want to live anymore. Yeah. She hates herself so much that she does not want to be there. And she's basically said, like, I'm not ever going to speak again. Like, that's what she's decided to do. So they're walking, and Nesta literally just collapses behind him. Like, she falls face forward. And Cassian realizes, like, she hasn't even been drinking water or anything. So he's kind of annoyed. But then, like, she just, like, lays there, like, indifferent. He's like, I'm so tired of this indifferent, like, Nesta. Like, stop acting like you don't care about stuff. You do. So they make camp, and Cassian basically thinks, like, I know that Nesta's going to talk eventually. And basically, when she does, like, all hell's going to break loose because she's going to lose it. So they make camp, and the next day he tells her that they're going to go to this lake and they're going to stay there for a day or two. And he just can't stop thinking, like, why is Nesta like this? And why can't she stop? Or no, Nesta's basically thinking, like, why am I like this? Why can I not stop being like this? And why do I, like, push everybody away? I push my sisters away. I push Cassian away. And Nesta doesn't even care that she made it down 10,000 steps. Like, she's like, I don't even know if it counts because I only did it because I was mad. Like, does it even matter now? And she wonders, like, just why? Like, why am I the way I am? So they make it to this lake, And she literally gets there, like falls down on her knees and just like starts sobbing. And she starts begging Cassian, like, please don't be nice to me because I let him die. And she's talking about her dad. And she says, like, he came to save me and I was horrible to him even up to the end. And all he wanted to do was save me. She says, I let him die and I can't fix what I said to Feyre. I can't fix any of it. I can't fix me. I can't bear it anymore. Cassian says, like, I was there. It wasn't your fault that, like, your dad died. But Nesta is not listening to him. And Cassian tells her, like, I'm a brute, I'm a bastard. And he says, you'll get through this. And these tears are good. And if you're willing to, like, fight through it, you'll make it through this. And Cassian just promised her, like, I'll be with you, like, along the way. And he realizes, like, he finally realizes why fire has bothered her so much this whole time. It's because that sound of the fire, of the, like, wood splitting is the sound her dad's neck made when he, like, had his neck broken. So he basically, like, starts getting her to, like, start training again and practicing her, like, sword movements to refocus and guide her. So we go to part 3, and that is Valkyrie. So so Nesta and Cassian are back home. So they stayed out there, and Emery's like, so you're telling me that you fell out with your whole family, disappeared for a week with Cassian, came back, knowing how to use a sword, and nothing else happened. And Nesta's like, okay, well, maybe stuff happened. Like, yeah, her and Cassian, like, had sex all over this, like, lake or whatever while they were out there. Whatever. Stop trying to act like that's not what you guys were out there doing. Like, we know. So now that they're back at practice, they have, like, a new task, and they're trying to cut a ribbon in half with a sword. And they're like, you just want us to cut this ribbon? I think that sounds really hard. Like, to aim at, like, a ribbon and just, like, slice it, like, that sounds super hard. So Emery goes first, and she can't do it. So they're like, you do it. And so, of course, Cassian does it, like, perfectly. And so Gwen invites Nesta after practice to come to the priestess ceremony service to hear music. And Nesta goes, and as she's, like, down there listening to them, she starts to feel, like, transported to, like, a place of, like, torture and suffering. And she realizes that she's visualizing the harp. And the harp is basically saying to her, like, free me and we shall rule the world and, like, play me. And so she, like, leaves from the ceremony and she goes to, like, Reese and all of them. And she's like, the harp is in the prison. So Reese gives Nesta one of the swords that she made and tells her to take it with her. And her and Cassian are planning to go to the prison. Nesta, they've all basically realized now that Nesta can get through any of the wards that are holding the Dread Trove items if they call to her, because, like, calls alike. So she's able to, like, break through any kind of boundaries. So they try to make a plan to stay safe in the prison, but Cassian, like, does not want Nesta to get hurt. So he's kind of babying her a little bit. And they wonder, like, why the harp would even be in the prison. And Cassian says that Reese thinks that the prison used to be an 8th court. And they get in the prison, and Nesta sees this, like, drawings that look like stars and constellations, and she finds the harp, and the harp magic just feels so different than the night court. The harp is located in the center of this 8-pointed star, and she starts to, like, hear, like, what sound like fae trapped in, like, the stone. It sounds like they're crying and begging to get out, and something about trying to get their children through. And she thinks it's like there used to be a door where this happened. Like, she doesn't know what is going on. So she grabs the harp, and then she starts to see an old crone with a crown, and she says, you have the harp. And she realizes that this is Briallen. The queen says that she knows about her friends, Gwen and Emery, and basically, like, is threatening, like, to do something to them. So Nesta collapses, and then Briallen's gone, but she can't get the harp to, like, let go of her. And the harp says that you're not nice, and asks if it should open a door. And it says that basically the last time it was used, it had horrible magic. And Nesta is like, you know, I don't want horrible magic. She's like, can you just, like, let go of me and, like, open, like, the ward so we can get out of here? And I was like, horrible idea. You're not being specific enough. This is bad. So the harp's like, yeah, I'll do that. You want me to open some stuff? I'll open some stuff. So Nesta starts to think, like, the last time that this harp was used, it must have been used to trap the fae that she was hearing in the stone. And that must have been what it was trying to do to her, because it basically, like, when she grabbed the harp, it was, like, sucking her into the stone as well. So she is, like, trying, like, she's ready to get out of here. and she tells Cassian that she saw Briallen. So her and Cassian go to leave, and she starts telling him that she did end up naming her sword. And he's like, okay, what'd you name it? And she says, I named it Ataraxia, which is from the old language. But she doesn't mention like what that means here. And she starts thinking how she considers, or she starts to tell Cassian, like, she considers him to actually be a friend. And he says, Nesta, I've always been your friend. And as they're getting ready to walk out, Cassian just suddenly throws Nesta behind him. And it's because Lanthus' cell is open, which again, Lanthus is the scary, scary monster that Cassian was terrified of that he put in the prison. And Cassian thinks, like, okay, I'm about to die. So Lanthus comes out and says, I wondered when we would meet again. And basically, like, when Nesta used the harp, it opened his cell door. Because I said she wasn't specific enough. Lanthus asks Nesta, like, what are you? And she says, a witch. And Cassian wants her to run, so at least she can make it. And she does start to run. And she thinks of Cassian dying. And the harp is like, we can open doors and pathways and move through space and time. And the harp has 26 strings on it, and she remembers Gwen telling her that Meryl was investigating dimensions and thought that there was 26 of them. As she's running away, she also runs into 10 Fae males who look like the Autumn Court prison or guards, and is like, okay, so Briallen must have sent them. So she plucks a string on the harp, and she's like, take me to Cassian. So Cassian literally starts yelling because I literally told you to get out of here. And he starts to yell, and Lanthus like turns into mist and like wraps around his throat and slams him like up against the wall. And Lanthus is like asking about Nesta's sword, and she's like, oh, it's called Ataraxia. And Lanthus just like laughs at her, so we still don't know what that means, but he just like laughs in her face about it. And Lanthus says, which death god is beneath your flesh? And she says, you know which one. And he says, it's not possible. And he says, you're the one we heard of. And he says, like, you're Nesta, basically. And he's like, you took from the cauldron and you don't know what you can do. So he starts showing her these fantasies of them together as a couple and says, like, they can take over the world and rebuild it. And it's like a vision of, like, them sitting on, like, thrones with, like, a crown on Lanthus's head. And she realizes, like, his whole plan is, like, because she's kind of like, oh, like, that, like, he's, like, messing with her mind. And she's like, this isn't bad. But then, like, she's like, no, like, you just want to be, like, slaves and have control. Then he starts giving her this other vision of, like them having, like, sex and, like, it being, like, amazing. And, like, she wants to have his kid. I was like, well, that's weird. What is going on here? And then she starts, like, she's like, okay, wait, no, that's wrong. Like, Cassian. So she's like, okay, no. So Lanthus is like, oh, I can take care of that. He's like, I'm going to kill Cassian and you don't have to worry about him anymore. So during this whole, like, conversation, Lanthus wasn't paying attention. So Cassian throws a dagger at him and it hits him in the chest, and then she takes her sword and literally cuts his head off. Like, that is her signature move. Mm-hmm. She is a decapitator. So Cassian says, grab the harp and let's go. And, like, Cassian can barely even stand. So she's like, okay, I think I need to pluck a couple strings to get out of here. So she, like, plucks 3 strings and, like, she's like, take us to the river house, and they land right in the front lawn. So they tell Cassian he's grounded so that he can heal for a couple of days. And they decide that it's going to be best if they keep the harp and the Maas separate from each other. So Nesta pretty much debriefs them on what happened and tells them how she felt when she first touched the harp. And she asks, like, what was the wild hunt? Because Lanthus mentioned that. And Rhys says he thought it was a myth, but basically if Lanthus remembers it, then Lanthus must be over 15,000 years old. So Rhys summons this book from the shelf, and it's called A Book of Legends, and he shows the Daglan, which were the first masters of their world. They were like gods, and they treated the Fae like slaves, and they were really cruel. Finn, who was a Fae soldier, had risen up against the Daglan and was given the sword, Gwydion, and he was able to defeat the Daglan. And he had tried to split up the land of Prythian into the 7 courts, but after 1,000 years, everyone had started fighting, so he was actually the first High King. But Finn ended up being betrayed and overthrown by his queen and his general and best friend, and that is when the 7 courts were made. So that was the wild hunt that Lanthus was talking about. Nesta asks if Amren was around during this time, and Rhys says that Amren arrived shortly before Finn fell, but she was put in the prison, and then, like, when she came out, the courts had already been divvied up and all of that stuff. So Nesta tells them of Lanthus's vision, and Cassian is super pissed about it. Like, what do you mean Lanthus was showing you visions of you guys as a couple? And Nesta asks if she could go after the crown, but everybody's like, no, like, we don't want to get anywhere close to Brialyn. Rhys wants to go and get it, but Feyre thinks it's too dangerous. And Rhys says that Eris will be at the winter solstice celebration, and he wants Nesta to dance with him because Elaine had told them how good she was at it. And Cassian is pissed about this. So Rhys basically wants Nesta to use her dancing to seduce Eris, which I still think is very strange, but whatever. And Rhys tells her, like, Moore can teach you the dances of, like, the hewn city. And Feyre says we need to show Eris some respect and that we trust him so we can keep him as our ally. Nesta has Adriel winnow her and Cassian to her old cabin. And she doesn't know why she wanted to go here, but she just basically needs some closure. So they walk around the cabin. It's, like, in a whole disarray because obviously they don't, they haven't lived here in years since Tamlin had them moved out, and then obviously there's no need for it now. And they see all of the paintings, and Cassian's like, Feyre painted all of this, and then they go into the room and they see the bed and the dresser, and he thinks it's like so weird that Feyre really painted stars before she ever even knew about Rhys and being his mate. And Nesta finds her father's carvings, and Cassian asks if her father had ever carved anything for her, and she says that she wouldn't let him. And Cassian says, it's okay, you were allowed to be angry. And she says, that's not what you said when you first met me. You said I was a piece of shit for letting my sister go into the woods to hunt. And he's like, I didn't say it just like that. So Nesta says, like, I hate that bed because my mother died in that bed. And she was like, I was born in that bed. My mother died in that bed. I hate that bed. But she said, I hated my father's cot even more because he looked so weak. And she says, I never even let my dad sleep in the bed, even when his leg was broke, because I wanted him to feel like how I felt. And she says that he had to know how terrible I was, and he still came to save me and still named a ship after me. And Cassian says, love is complicated. Nesta says, I never even considered what it was like for him. And she says that she let Feyre watch as they beat her dad while she and Elaine had hid. And she's just like, I failed Feyre in so many ways. Yes. Yes, you did. So Nesta, they leave from here. And Nesta is finally starting to look healthy again. Like, she's been just spending time, like, with Cassian. She's been training. She's learning these dances. And it's almost time for the winter solstice ball. So Moore tells her, like, she has to wear just the right dress for Eris. And Nessa's like, well, I don't want to wear, like, what you and Feyre wear, because, like, y'all be naked. But, yeah. So she's like, Moore's like, I'll find you a dress. Gwen and Emery meet her in the library, and Gwen wants to exchange gifts before solstice. And Emery, like, looks really strange, and they're like, what's wrong? And they're kind of on one of the lower levels. And Gwen says, like, I can hear my dad yelling at me. And she's like, this place is so strange. And so Nessa's like, let's just move up some levels and get away from the darkness. So Gwen gives them their gifts, and they're basically books. And so they're books on the Valkyrie. And so Gwen basically had Meryl add her, Nesta, and Emery to the stories about the Valkyries because they're doing their training. And that night, Cassian has to stay overnight at one of the Illyrian camps. So Nesta's alone at the house, and she decides that she's going to try to have a fire. So Nesta tries the fire, and she's doing okay. And then Nesta decides to go down to the library to the darkness because she's just like, what is it? So she goes down to the very bottom, and she realizes that this is just the essence of the house. Like, it's like the heart of the house. And she goes like, this is the heart, like, basically, like, this is you. And it places, like, a little, like, sprig leaf at her feet to basically, like, say, like, yeah, this is me. And she's, like, not scared of it anymore because, like, basically, like, that's what the house has been trying to get her to, like, see is, like, the darkness is okay. Like, I'm not here to hurt you. We go to the solstice ball, and, like, Cassian's pissed off because he does not want her dancing with Eris. So they all go to the hewn city, and he is like, Elaine looks so ridiculous in black. Like, black is not her color. She should never wear black. He talks about it for like a paragraph. He's like, she looks terrible. But he's like, Nesta looks amazing. She has like a braid crown and a tiara and like some really nice dress. So Rhys goes to Eris and gives him a present, and it's Like, Cassian's like, oh, he gets a gift too? Like, what the hell? And Rhys gives him one of Nesta's daggers. And basically, Eris is like, why would you give me this? And he's like, you know, it's a family. He's like, it's a family heirloom. And Eris is like, so you had a made weapon the whole time and didn't use it in the war? Like, Eris is like, that's suspicious. So Feyre tells Eris, like, well, I would dance with you, but because I'm pregnant, like, it makes me sick, so you should dance with Nesta. And Cassian's literally, like, grinding his teeth out of his jaw. So they dance, and Nesta, like, I feel like this is the goofiest part of this entire book. Because Nesta literally just spins and spins and spins for like 30 pages. And I'm like, I just can't take it serious. Like, I get it, but I can't. So somehow all this dancing is seducing Eris. And Cassian knows, like, basically if Eris finds out what kind of power Nesta has, like, he will want to have her. So Eris tells Nesta, like, Rhys keeps you hidden and that the war seems to have changed her. He says, don't believe the lies they say about me, and that Moore knows the truth, but she doesn't want to reveal it. And Nesta says, you don't make it easy. And he says, I do. I ally with your court. He says, he tells Nesta that you're wasted at the Night Court. And then Cassian is like, move. And Eris is like, I don't take orders from brutes. Go sit at your master's feet, dog. And Nesta's pissed, but she's like, okay, I can't, like, knock his head off because that defeats the purpose of me dancing with him. But she's like, okay, I'm gonna dance with Cassian now. So Eris goes to talk to Rhys, and Rhys lets like Cassian and Nesta dance for a little bit, and then Nesta starts dancing with Azriel, and Cassian goes to talk to Moore, and so Rhys lets Moore and Cassian in his mind while he's talking to Eris. And Eris says, I'll give you whatever you want in exchange to marry like Nesta. And Rhys is like, that's not really my choice. And Eris is basically like, I'll give you anything but my firstborn child. Like, you do not want to marry her that bad. And he's like, I can't have my wife's sister going into battle alone. Like, you're a little ahead of it, don't you think? And Rhys says, I'll think about it. Well, meanwhile, like, Feyre and Cassian are like, absolutely not. I will, like, grind your bones. I will kill you. So Nesta is like starting to shut down a little bit after the dance. So they go to Feyre's for the solstice celebration, and Elaine is surprised that she came. And she goes, did Feyre pay you like last year? And she asks Nesta, like, can you not be upset today because it is our sister's birthday? And Nesta goes, fuck you. And then Nesta goes, oh my God, like, oh, I did not mean to say that. And Elaine just starts laughing, and she's like, oh my gosh, you've never talked to me like that. And she's like, I think that's a good sign, like, that we're off to a good start. Like, you're starting to recognize me as, like, a person. So apparently that's a good thing. So Lucien comes to Solstice, like, everybody's there. We learn Tamlin knows about the baby, and it went, like, as good as expected. And Cassian's just kind of worried about this year's gift because we know last year he tried to give Nesta a gift and she didn't want it and he threw it into the river. So we find out what the gift was. He had got her like some little tiny copy of like the first book ever crafted or something. I don't know. It was sentimental. It wasn't for reading. And so Cassian gets like a whole bunch of weird gifts. Like Az gets him like beef jerky because he's like, I didn't know what else to get you. Rhys gives him like a war manuscript. Moore gets him an ugly sweater. Elaine gets him like this unbreakable mug, and then Feyre gives him like a painting of like him, Rhys, and Azriel like on top of like Ramiel or something, and he like cries about it. I'm like, oh, Cassian, you're so sensitive. So only Elaine and Feyre get Nesta gifts, which is a bunch of book credit. And then Azriel comes up and he got Nesta a gift, and he gives her like a book light, and she literally like hugs him.
I thought that was the sweetest.
I know. I like their relationship. They have like a budding friendship. So that night, they decide to stay there because basically Cassian's like, I'm going to be drunk. All the people that can fly are going to be drunk, so we're going to stay here tonight. So Nesta just goes to her room, and Cassian comes in and is like, so you're not going to say goodnight? And he's like, I want to give you your present. And he gives her a music box that's called a Symphonia. And I was like, if he wanted to, he would, ladies. So this little music box plays music, and it's like all the music from the night before at the ball. And So first Nesta like apologizes for last year and the gift. And she asks Cassian, like, how did you get all of this recorded, like, from the ball last night without the background noise? It was the other night. It wasn't last night. But she's like, how did you get this, like, recorded without the background noise? And basically Cassian said, like, he went back the next night and asked, like, the orchestra to play all the same songs again. And then he went to, like, all of her favorite taverns and had them play music and he recorded it. Like, what? That's crazy. So Nesta's, like, having a meltdown. She's like, I can't take this. Like, take it back. And she's like, return it. And he says, it's a gift. It's not a wedding ring, Nesta. Like, Jesus. And she says, no, I have Eris for that. And Cassian says, say that again. And Nesta says, Eris wants to marry me. And literally Cassian's siphons start flickering because he's pissed. And he says, I get it. I get too close to you and you shove me away. And Nesta says, I'm not with you. I'm just having sex with you, basically. And he says, that's the only thing fit for a bastard-born brute, right? And Nesta says, I didn't say that. And Cassian says, you might as well. You've said it 1,000 times. Nesta says, why did you cut in at the ball? And he says, because I was jealous. Because you look like a queen and you don't deserve to be with a lowborn like me. But he says, but go ahead, Nesta. Like, go ahead and marry him. And Nesta says, Eris is the brute. And I would marry him because I'm just like him. I deserve him. She says, you are good, Cassian, and you are brave and brilliant and kind, and I could kill anyone who thinks less of you. She says, I know I'm part of the group that said those things about you, and I hate it. I do not deserve you, not before or after the war, and certainly not now. Denying myself of you was my punishment. She says, from the moment I met you, I wanted you more than reason. You were all I could think about, and it terrified me because no one has ever held that much power over me, and I'm afraid that someone will take it away, and I'll never deserve you. Oh, my heart. Sensitive Nesta. And so, like, Cassian just, like, grabs her and hugs her and says, like, you're not going to marry Eris. He says there will never be no one else for either of us ever. And she just says yes. And so that night they have sex again, but this is different. She's like, it feels like a binding between them, like Starfire, like just, I don't know. It's just a very intense moment. So the next morning, Cassian jumps up and he's like, I gotta go. It's a snowball fight. I gotta go. I'm gonna miss a snowball fight. And Nesta's like, you are a like 280-pound Illyrian general war leader and you're rushing to go to a snowball fight with Rhys and Azriel. And he goes, oh, by the way, after the snowball fight, we like get naked and sit in the steam shed. Like that piqued her interest. But we actually don't find out who wins this year's fight. But then after that, Cassian's gone for a couple of days to one of the war camps. So Azriel has to take over the training for a few days. And Nesta decides to ask Gwen and Emery if they would spend the night at the house. So they stay over and the house like stocks them up on dessert and like puts out cots. Like it was like a super nice sleepover. And they're basically like, oh, you did all of this? And Nesta's like, no, the house did it. And they're like, the house? And she's like, yeah, the house will give you whatever you want. So Gwen's like, can I have pistachio cake? And then just like appears in front of her. And she's like, oh yeah, I like this. So they like play around the house. Like they're trying on jewelry and like hats and stuff. And Gwen pulls out this like these friendship bracelets basically. And she's like, her and her sister used to make them. And so she brought them because she didn't know they'd have like activities to do. So they make these bracelets and they put like these little charms on them. And Nesta basically like holds them and makes a wish that says like they'll always be able to find each other. And yeah. So Cassian comes back to training and Gwen finally gets to cut the ribbon. And then Emery cuts it. And then Nesta cuts it. And like whenever they're training, they have this little like saying from the Valkyries that says like, I am the rock against which the surf crashes. Nothing can break me. After they're all able to cut the ribbon, Cassian seems to be avoiding Nesta, but then the next morning, the training ring is completely transformed, and she figures out, like, that's why. And he tells them, like, the Valkyries must be able to work as a unit, so they have to be able to get through this obstacle course together. And they can't. And then on top of that, they change the obstacle course every night. So, like, they are struggling. And Gwen and Azriel start to have, like, a little bit of moments, and I'm like, what's going on there? So, after 2 months of this obstacle course, they are finally able to beat it as a unit. And they get told, because at one point, Gwen's like, okay, so what do we win? And Azrael's like, I mean, we don't expect you to beat it, so, like, there's no prize. So they finally beat it, and Gwen's like, okay, so where's my prize? And they get told that they have qualified for the blood rite. And they look up and they realize that Devlin and like some other guy was there watching them. So they basically had like confirmation that they had qualified for the blood rite. And that day, all of the other priestesses had been like called away to like a special ceremony. And that's why, because they had, Cassian and Azrael told them like there would be other men there basically. So like if they don't want to come, they didn't have to. So Emery's like, do we have to enter the rite now that we like qualified? And they're like, oh no, like you don't have to. We just wanted to like prove your point. So Nesta goes back to the steps and she's like, okay, I want to do this like not angry. So she's going down the steps and she's just kind of thinking about like her and Cassian are like actually sharing a bed now. Like they either go to her bed or his bed. They're not just like leaving afterwards. And she's able to make it down all the steps again, just like breathing easily. She considers going out to the city, but she like thinks like, I'd rather go back to Cassian. So she climbs back to the top. That's the hard part. 10,000 steps. How long, realistically, do you think it takes somebody to do that?
A long time. I personally would have a book with me and take my little breaks and read. And then
I'm never going to make it. My worst fear is that I would get, like, too far down, but, like, so far. Like, I would be in the middle. I don't know that I can make it 5,000 steps, though, but, like, that's my worst fear is that I'm claustrophobic kind of thinking about it. Because this is kind of like a Rapunzel tower that I think these stairs are in. And so, like, just being like stuck in the stairwell, like I'd be like trying to punch out of this wall because I can't breathe. Like I'm not gonna make it up or down. Like I can't do this. I would be having a panic attack.
So people have looked up.
I know people do it. Like they go to the gym and like will do this.
So on a Reddit thread,
I love Reddit.
They said somebody said it would take me 10 days.
Yeah, me too. I'd still be there right now.
Somebody said there are about 20 to 22 steps in one floor, so 476 floors.
Oh my god.
So forever.
There's just no way. That is so unrealistic. There's just no way that anybody could ever do that. There's no freaking way.
Okay. The tallest building in the world is 2,909 steps, which is about 200 stories.
3,000 steps. So she did like triple that plus some. There's no way on this earth. That's crazy.
Yep.
That's crazy. There's no way. And then she climbed back up them. It's the up for me.
Yeah.
I'm never going up them. I'm not even going to pretend I'm going to go up them. Yeah. See, I'm very realistic with myself. That's not real. But her man's is up there. So she's like, I'm going back up there. And he's up there waiting for her. So he picks her up and it's Starfall. So he takes her to the Starfall party. And it's like, Nesta's just like happy to be alive. She's like laughing and Amren comes up and says, that's a sound I never thought I'd hear. And she bows to Amren and just says like, I am so sorry. Like you gave me kindness and respect in your time and I treated it like garbage, but losing your friendship is a loss I can't endure. And Amren says that you changed this house, girl. And she's like, what do you mean? Like the house is, she's like, no, you brought it to life. And she's like, how? And she's like, what did you want when you came here? And Nessa's like, a friend. And she's like, and you made one. So the winter is now over and they've made it through the whole winter without hearing from Brialyn, from the other queen. And at this point, Feyre is due in like 2 months. So the blood rite is also in 2 days and Eris wants to meet with Cassian and Nesta again. So he meets with them and basically says like Baron went back to the continent to meet with Brialyn again and he came back and he still seems normal so they don't think he's under anybody's control. Eris says you need to find the harp and Nesta just kind of like blinks and he's like, you already have the harp, don't you? So he's like, okay, what else are you keeping from me? And he's like, so are you guys going to go after the crown? And he's like, you'd be stupid to go after the crown, but he's like, what are you guys going to do? Like just keep everything for yourselves? And he asked Nesta, like, did you consider my offer? And she says, well, if I have all of the trove, like, what do I need you for? So he's pissed and he just leaves. So they start to fly and like they're getting cozy in the sky. And I'm like, what is with these people with the sky. Like, what about being up there
Fair.
makes you want to hanky-panky? I don't understand.
That's not...
Nothing about that seems like the appropriate time. Because Nesta's like, well, there's people watching. And Cassian's like, I don't care. I want them to know that you're mine.
I mean, for one, you're in the freaking air. And for two, I'm sorry. But if I'm like, oh, it's a bird. It's a plane. Oh, it pooped on me. Oh, wait.
No, not poop. not poop. Oh my gosh. I'm suing the city of Valaris right now. Like, why?
No, thank you.
You guys have all of these houses. You have all of these locations. You don't have to do it in the sky. So, but they don't. They just talk about it, unlike Feyre and Rhys. But anyways, so Nesta asks Cassian, like, do you feel like it makes me look like less of a warrior when I'm with you? He's like, no, it doesn't make Feyre look like less of a warrior. But she's like, well, Feyre is Rhys's mate. Like, that's different. And Cassian's like, so you don't want to be mates with me, basically? And Nesta's like, I don't use that word. Like, we just had husband and wives. And Cassian says, like, ask me why I disappeared for a week after solstice. And she like, well, he's like, I want you to say the words. He's like, ask me why. And he's like, because all I want to do was like have sex with you for like a week straight after that. He's like, say it, Nesta. I know that you know. Like, say what you knew. He's like, I knew it from the moment we met. Like, say it. And he says, I am your mate and you're mine. And I don't know why you won't just say it. And she says, because my humanity will go away if I say it. She's like, that's the last scrap of humanity I have. And if that one little word will make it all go away. And he says, well, I didn't, and she's like, I basically didn't get a choice to like, for this life. And he's like, well, I didn't get a choice either to be shackled to you. And so, of course, that hurt her. And she's like, shackled. So she goes, I'm calling in my favor. She says, I don't want to see you or speak to you for a week unless I come to you first. And he tries to fight it, but it's a bargain and he can't. So he leaves. And so she goes to Emery's. I think Moore takes her, and Gwen end up coming as well. And so they talk. They're spending the night at Emery's, and then she's like, you know what? I'm just going to talk to him tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to make him wait a week. It'll be fine. I'll talk to him tomorrow. But unfortunately that night, she wakes up to a man in her room. She hears Gwen screaming, and she basically gets kidnapped.
Yep.
So the next day, Cassian goes to the house of Gwen, and he's like, yeah, I'm not waiting a week either. There's ways around this bargain. So he goes to Rhys, and he's like, Rhys, I want you to take me to Windhaven, because he knows, like, that's where Emery is. And he knows, like, he says, like, he's known that Nesta was his mate even before, like, she was Fae. Like, he's known that he could feel it. And he said he was never afraid of being her mate, but he was afraid of her rejecting the bond. Mm-hmm. And Rhys, like, looks pretty, like, grim. And they get to the house, and he's like, they smell males. And they're like, oh, my gosh. And then he realizes, like, today's the day of the rite. So yesterday was the one day out of the year that Illyrians do have magic. So he basically realizes that they've come and they've taken the girls. And they know, like, this was basically to teach them a message for, like, letting females train and pretend to be warriors. So they contact Devlin, and Devlin confirms that the girls were taken and that they're in the right. And we go to part 4, which is ataraxia. So Nesta wakes up around a bunch of unconscious males, and her powers are bound. She's in only a nightgown. She has no weapons, and her friends are nowhere to be found. At this point, we start switching back and forth a lot. So Cassian wants to go after them, but Azriel is like, you know the laws. So basically, anybody who tries to pull someone out of the right is going to be hunted down and killed, and they also will hunt down and kill the person that was removed from the right. So, like, even Rhys cannot interfere with the right. It is long-standing tradition. Azriel says Eris has also been captured by Briallyn, and Cassian's like, I don't give a damn. Like, I don't care about Eris. I don't care. And basically, they said, like, Eris was, like, looking for his other soldiers, and he got kidnapped. And they're like, well, why would he do that, you idiot? So Rhys says, like, okay, well, I can't go after Eris, so Cassian, I need you and Azriel to go. And they're like, why can't you go, Rhys? And Feyre tells them about their stupid bargain. So it's Rhys, Feyre, Cassian, Azriel, and Amren. And I was like, also, side note, because I'm like, so basically, from this point forward, Rhys can just never participate in anything.
Right.
Like, because, like, you're the High Lord, and then you can't even be in the battles. Because Feyre's, like, there has to be a way out of this bargain. I can't wait for this next book because I want this bargain ship wrapped up by 12 o'clock tomorrow.
I'm like, if both of them agree that...
Like, yeah, I'm not breaking it. Like, can we just come to a term? Like, can we just negate the whole thing? It's stupid. It's dumb. Like, Reese, you can't be the High Lord and be like, well, I gotta sit this one out, guys. I'll just do, like, the paperwork side of it.
Or, like, leave your kid an orphan because...
Yeah, like, that's dumb. That was so dumb. I hated it. I hated it from the moment it happened. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So, and Amber does too. Amber's like, you idiots. Like, she's like, why would you do that? Like, that was absolutely so stupid. So they basically, then they put together the fact that, oh, like, Feyre's going to die in labor, and that, like, oh, Reese, so you're about to die too. Like, they already were like, damn, like, Feyre's going to die, but now they're like, oh, like, all three of you are going to die. Huh. So we're just like, who's going to be High Lord now? Like, oh my God. So stupid. And Amren's like, you guys are fools. And Cassian says, like, well, why can't Amren go? And they're like, well, Amren doesn't have any powers. Now, like, Amren can't. And Moore's out of range, so they can't even ask her to do it because she's too far away. So that just leaves Cassian and Azriel. And he's like, Nesta's stuck in the right anyway. So, like, there's nothing you can do for her. Like, you might as well go do this. Feyre thinks that, like, Eris is going to reveal too much because Brialyn has the crown and she'll use it on him. And so, they have to get to him. But they think, like, if he has the dagger from Nesta, it might be able to shield him from the powers of the crown. So, that's only if he has the dagger, though. Back to Nesta. She is, like, running through the woods from one of the males chasing her. And he's throwing daggers at her, which they're not supposed to have weapons out here. So where did the weapons come from? And she's able to, like, stab him in the throat as they fall down this hill. So she only had a nightgown on, so she changes out of her nightgown and puts on this guy's clothes. Back to Cassian. He basically, oh no, we're still with Nesta. So Cassian had told her about 3 different places where they would dump people for the right. So she knows, like, there's probably 2 other locations. So she's determined to find them. So that she can find her friends, and she, like, has a little bit of hope that Cassian will come and find her, but then she remembers the law and, like, she knows that he's not coming. But she looks at her friendship bracelet and the charm is glowing anytime she points her arm the north direction. So she's like, I must have put some of my magic in here. So as she starts to head that way, she gets captured again by another male as she's trying to, like, pick up weapons to take with her. And while this is all going on, Cassian is basically just, like, circling around the queen's castle to, like, scope out the place. So the male had a bow and an arrow, and he wants the weapons that Nesta has. And she asked if there were any females where he had come from. She asked if he had killed her female friends, and he says, no, I left the crippled one for the others. So she throws a knife at him, and it hits him in the balls. And then she, like, steps on it and, like, really sticks it in there good, and she just, like, leaves him there screaming and crying. And I said, that's beautiful. I love that. So she hears a bunch of males talking and knows that they're looking for Emery, and she, like, looks over down to this river, and she sees Emery, like, unconscious, like, half in the river. So she goes down and basically, like, can't wake her up, so she, like, ties her to her back and is able to carry her off to the shore. And then she's, like, makes a fire and, like, starts warming Emery up. And so she knows, like, that it's about to be nighttime, so they have to find cover. And so she's looking for a cave, and a male comes out, and she's like, okay, I can't trust you. But he's like, he's bleeding, and he's like, I'm not here to harm you. Like, he was like, you don't want to be out here at night. And he's like, you must have someone hurt with you if you're not climbing the trees. And he's like, I'm going in here, so if you're coming, you better come now. And he's like, I know who you are. Like, I'm not going after Feyre, Cursebreaker's sister. So, like, come on. So they go in there, and basically she makes him swear an oath not to do, like, anything to them or send anybody after them. And she's able to, like, get Emery changed into a man's clothes. And we learned that this male's name is Balthazar, and all I could think of was Cole from Charmed. Did you watch Charmed?
Nope.
Oh my God! That is blasphemy. That's crazy. Oh my God. Okay, anyways, if you watch Charmed like a normal person, you know who Cole is and Phoebe. Oh my God. Anyways, so, like, Balthazar is like, you know, I'll take the first watch, but Nessa's like, yeah, I'm not sleeping around you, dude. Like, I'm not an idiot. So she doesn't go to sleep. But the next morning they wake up, and he's like, oh yeah, there's plenty of clothes out here because there's a bunch of half-eaten males everywhere because all of the creepy monsters that come out at night. And, like, Nessa's looking for pants, but they're all, like, peed or pooped on. while they were getting eaten alive. I'm like, oh dear God. So Cassian is still like looking for Eris. They haven't seen anything. They go to a tavern near the like castle, and they did hear of like a red-haired male being supposed to be moved soon, so they know that he's there, but they still haven't seen him. So Emery finally wakes up. She asks about Gwen, and the charm is now pointing towards the south, and so they're like, I'm pretty sure Gwen is that way. So Emery tells them that basically she had run from, like, she had woke up before everybody else, and she had made a run for it, but then they started chasing her, so she had to, like, jump into the river, and she hit her head on a rock, so that's how she ended up passed out. They're looking for Gwen, and they see a fire, and they see a nightgown hanging from, like, a tree. And Nesta's like, if they hurt Gwen, I'm not even going to worry about Ramiel. I'm going to murder all of them. So she's, like, looking at the nightgown, turns around, and she sees Emery being held downhill by two grinning males, and one of them is her cousin, Bellius. He says he didn't think that she'd be dumb enough to fall for the nightgown trick, and Nesta thinks that Bellius seems like a little off, and she wonders if Briallen has gotten to him. He says that he wants first dibs on Nesta, but then, like, all of a sudden one of his friends is, like, splattered open, and they see this half cat, half serpent creature come out of nowhere. So they take off running as, like, the guys square off with this thing, and they see Gwen. And Gwen says that she had, like, woken up before everyone else, and so she's been, like, hiding out in the trees. But she also saw where the beasts, like, sleep during the daytime, and they don't like to be woken up, so she basically woke one up and, like, made it chase her and let it right to them so she could get away. That night, they get up in the trees to rest and get away from the beast. And Emery basically tells them, like, how hard it is to climb Ramiel because the mountain is basically covered in, like, sharp rock. And she said it slices you like a cheese grater. And on top of that, it is snowing. She tells them the history of the rite. So the point of the rite is to honor their god, Analius. Basically, like, he had gotten some big battle on the mountain and he ended up dying. But that's the purpose of the rite. So after, like, 2 more days, the next day they go down and they reach this bridge and they're getting ready to cross it, and they see, like, these other guys coming trying to cross it. So they start, like, fighting the guys, and then they start running, and Gwen gets shot in the leg by an arrow. So Nesta, like, is like, my sister taught me how to use a bow and arrow. So she, like, shoots an arrow at Gwen. Gwen wraps it around her, and then, like, she tells Gwen to run because her and Emery already made it across the bridge. And she, like, cuts this bridge, and then Gwen just goes, like, free flying on this rope. I'm like, absolutely not. And somehow Gwen and Nesta are able to hold the rope so that Gwen doesn't plummet to her death and, like, pull her up on the other side.
I feel like she'd snap her back or something.
Something, like...
Pull the other two down because of the
Yeah, like, there's
force.
There's absolutely no way that this is working in real life. Like, please don't try it. In the meantime, Cassian is still, like, circling this castle, and he tells Azrael, like, I don't know how you do this job because it is so boring. It's been, like, 4 days. But they finally see a small caravan leading, and they're like, I don't see a prison wagon. And they're like, oh, there isn't one because Eris is riding a horse. He's a traitor. And he's wearing the dagger. So Cassian's like, we need to catch him, and we need to kill him. So after a couple of days, you know, they're still trekking through the woods, and the girls finally make it to the base of the mountain, and they see the 3 stars out. So, like, it's like the final night of the rite, and Nesta and Emery are like, okay, like, we can just hide in the trees, like, we could just go over here, like, we're good. We made it to the base of the mountain, so, like, we get the, like, lowest level of, like, recognition. But Gwen's like, so we came this far just to hide? And I would have said, yes we did, absolutely. But Gwen's like, I don't want to take the safe road. She's like, I want to take the hardest route to the top, which is what they call the breaking, which is the pass of Analius. And of course, that's the route that, like, Cassian and Rhys and them took too, because of course. So Gwen starts to tell them her story. Gwen says that she was raped by a Highburn commander when her temple was sacked. And the guy basically, like, laughed while he did it. So when they were looking for the cauldron, they came to the temple of Sangrava. Her sister had sent her to go hide all the kids, and, like, they basically hid under, like, the floorboards. But as she was closing it, like, she heard them coming, so she knew she couldn't get under it in time and, like, cover it up. So she closed it with the kids down there and, like, put the rug and stuff over it so they wouldn't know it was there. So when they came in, they, like, rallied up all of the other girls, including her sister, and they were basically like, tell us where the kids are. And she wouldn't. So they were able to like scent out that her sister was her sister and literally beheaded her in front of her. And then the commander raped her. And then he was telling 3 more other like commanders to come in and rape her. But that's when Azriel got there and like handle business basically. And she says like she had been like a virgin when this happened. Like she had never participated in the riot or in Calamai or like anything at this time. So like he took all of that from her. She says when she got to the library, she didn't speak for 5 months. She would go to basically kind of like therapy and she would cry or scream. And then she said she started working with Meryl, which really helped focus her. And then Nesta came and she said she could tell something had hurt her as well. And she decided to sign up for the training because she knows her sister would have done it. She says, I don't wear the hood or the stone because it represents holiness. And how can I be holy after like what happened to her basically? Emery tells her story. Emery says that what her father like did to her with her wings wasn't the worst thing. He actually like one time beat her so bad that he broke her back and then told everybody that she was just sick and in bed. She said that he used to beat her mother and that she thinks her mother shielded her from him, but like then her mom ended up dying, so then she got the brunt of it. He also beat her mom so bad that he killed her and then made Emery bury her body and then told everybody that her mother had died in childbirth. And she said it was terrible because everyone always thought her dad was such a good guy and he was charming and smart and always would tell her how lucky she was to have him as a dad. And she was so happy when he died and didn't come home. And she said, I'll climb this mountain for my mother and face the breaking just for her. So Nesta tells them that I was sent to the house for being a wretch. I abused her friend's kindness for over a year because my father died. And she basically breaks down and like just tells them everything. She's like, I want them to know because she feels like, okay, you two had horrible things happen to you versus me being a horrible person. So she's like, I wanted everything on the table so they knew who they were going up this mountain with and they could decide not to. But they decide to do it. So they get like 2/3 of the way up. And they need to take a break. So Gwen still has like a hole in her leg. And then at some point, Emery kind of twists her ankle as well. But dawn is only 4 hours away. So the rite is over when somebody hits the stone or when dawn happens on like the 7th day. So they're almost over no matter what. And as they're up here, 7 males approach and including Bellius. Like, of course you didn't die. So we go back over to Cassian real fast. And they basically tried to sneak up on this caravan. But somehow Eris ends up apprehending Cassian with Nesta's blade. And Azriel tells Eris, like, you're going to be a dead man. And Eris says, well, Rhys should have got in my head. Like, he's getting weak, basically. And Eris calls Moore the Morrigan. And Cassian thinks how weird that is because he never refers to Moore that way. And then Briallen approaches. We switch back over to Nesta. And Nesta had basically strapped Gwen to her back because she couldn't really walk with her leg. And they are like going up the breaking and they stumble and fall and they literally like roll all the way back down to where they had just come from. And Nesta just says like, I can't carry you anymore. Like, we're not going to make it. So she tells Gwen and Emery that they just need to go up and hit the stone and that she will hold off Bellius and like the rest of the guys. And Gwen's like, no, like, I'm not doing that. Like all these things, like, I'm not doing that. But she basically like grabs Gwen in a hug and she pinches a pressure point to knock her out and tells Emery like, you have to take her. And Emery says she'll never forgive you. And Nesta says, I know. But she ties Gwen to the Emery's back and like they head off. And then we go back over to Cassian real fast. Him and Azriel are being led to a lake by Eris and Briallen. And as they approach, the cloak on Briallen's like thing gets pulled back and it just completely disappears. It wasn't even Briallen. It was a mirage. And Kosjay appears on the freaking lake and is like basically like, oh, look what like a little bit of magic can do. And then Nesta is standing at this bottleneck like in the mountain just like waiting for these soldiers to come so she can try to help her friends get to the top. So Bellius sent like all of his warriors to fight Nesta first. And she is thinking about her sword, Ataraxia, and this is where she finally tells us what it means. It means inner peace. We flash back over to Cassian, and Kosjay tells them, like, I spent months preparing for you. Don't you want to speak to me? And he says, you took your time making contact. And Azriel tells Cassian to run, and he grabs Eris and, like, launches into the sky. But Cassian tries to do the same thing, and he can't move. His siphons, like, try to light up, but then they just go out. And then Kosjay tells Briallen to take him and tells her she has plenty of time before dawn. And the last thing he tells Cassian is, tell my Vasa I'm waiting. Brialyn tells Cassian, I have need of you, Lord of Bastards, and then the world disappears. Back to Nesta, Bellius tells her, our first god of the Illyrians fought right where you're standing and died here, and that's what we have to do this stupid rite. And then all of a sudden there's a light at the top of the mountain, and she knows that Emery and Gwen made it, and they must have touched the stone. And she tells Bellius, like, well, it seems like you didn't win. And he says, I never wanted to win. I wanted to do this. And he attacks her. And she thinks it's like, all I have to do is make it until my power comes back. Like, the rite's over. But he literally starts, like, punching her. Like, he is really beating on her. And he grabs a knife and he's like, I'm basically going to slit your throat. So he comes to her and he's about to do it. And all of a sudden, there's, like, thunder that cracks and blood sprays. And Cassian's here! And Cassian, like, steps over and pulls Nesta up. He holds her and leans in and he says, I'm going to slit your pretty little throat, and starts squeezing her to death. And Nesta's like, oh my gosh, this is not Cassian. And he starts begging her, like, please kill me before I have to do this. And she hears Brialyn say, he's mine now. Brialyn says that she was the one that had them put into the rite. She actually only had meant to have Emery put in because she knew Nesta would come after her, but it actually worked out in her favor. And she said she had to wait a few days to finally get Cassian, but she finally got him. And Nesta asks, like, why don't you just want peace? And Brialyn says, I want retribution. I want power. I want the trove. She wants Nesta to summon the trove to her so that she can make herself young again. And she says if she does that, she'll spare them. Cassian is trying to fight against the crown, and it's working a little bit because she tells Cassian to kill Nesta. But instead of pointing the knife at Nesta, he turns it on himself, and Nesta literally just explodes her power. She jumps on Brialyn and, like, grabs her face, and literally she, like, Benjamin Buttons her. So she literally goes from, like, an old crone back to, like, a young lady and then turns to dust. And Cassian tells her that she unmade her. She turns to Cassian and says, you are my mate, and he says, you are mine. And then more in Azrael land, and they tell them that they have Eris. He's confused, and he is in their possession. But they say it's Feyre. So now Feyre's in. I'm like, it's just one thing after another.
Yeah.
So they, like, all, like, winnow back, and they get to the river house, and Feyre is in labor, and Nesta's like, she is not due yet. Like, she has 2 months. And they said she basically started bleeding a few hours ago. And, like, she's laying there, like, she's breathing really shallow. There's, like, blood all over the place. She's, like, white as a sheet. And the healer is in there. She's, like, trying to turn the baby, but, like, she's just lost too much blood. And, like, nothing that they can do can save her. And Feyre wants them to try to cut the baby out. She doesn't care, like, that no one else has lived. Like, she's like, cut the baby out. And basically, Feyre and the baby are dying, and Rhys is going to die with them. And Rhys is, like, trying to heal her, and he goes into her mind because they're going to try and cut the baby out. And, like, he goes in her mind to take the pain away, and they finally do cut the baby out, but it's a boy, and he's not moving, he's not making a sound, and they just hand him over to Moore. And Rhys starts screaming, like, he, like, is, like, losing it, and Feyre's dying, and Nesta is like, Nesta says she could feel death nearby, and she had to do something. So Cassian and Azrael are literally trying to hold Rhys back, but Nesta's also thinking, like, I mean, he might as well go to her, like, they're about to die, like, he might as well, but Nesta summons the mask, the harp, and the crown to her, and she has them all on her. And she, basically, like, her eyes, like, light up in silver flame, and, like, Rhys, like, starts to go to her, and she just puts her hand up, and he, like, backs off, and she goes over to the bed, and she plucks the 26th string, and that makes time stop as Feyre takes her last breath. So she hears a voice that asks, like, I thought you didn't want to feel anything. And Nesta says, no, I want to feel everything, experience all of it, live through all of it with all of them. And she grabs Feyre's hand and says, you loved me even when no one else did. And she tells Feyre that she loves her, and she had never told anyone that she loved them before, and she just grabs a hold of her. And she asks, like, the voice, and basically says, like, if you show me how to save her, you can have it all back, all of the power. And all she can think of is Rhysand, and she thinks of him as her brother now. She thinks of her nephew, of the baby. She says, I'll give it all back. And she feels like what feels like a hand brushing into her cheek. And all of a sudden, time resumes, and Cassian, like, sees Nesta, who was just, like, standing next to him all the way over on the bed, and they can hear her talking to Feyre, saying, like, I'll give it all back, I'll give it all back. And then the mask and the crown fall off, and, like, light is, like, trickling, like, towards Feyre, towards Rhys, towards the baby, and then light just kind of explodes in the room, and there's a new tattoo, like, down Nesta's back, and she has made a bargain with the cauldron. Which I'm like, how'd that work? So, all of a sudden, Feyre is alive, and Feyre turns to Nesta and says, I love you too. And then they hear, like, a nice, healthy cry from the baby that Moore's holding. And the healer looks at Feyre's body and says, like, you have an Illyrian anatomy now. Basically, like, her pelvis is wide. And Rhys turns to Nesta and, like, falls to his knees and takes her hand and just says, thank you. But Nesta gets down on her knees, too, and, like, grabs his face and tells, like, and just, like, hugs him. Gwen and Emery are healed, and they're actually out, like, in the, like, the sitting area of the house. And Nesta's like, how'd you guys get here? And they're like, I don't know. Like, this is where we got transported to. And, like, basically they got healed as soon as they, like, got winnowed out of the right. And Gwen says, I should never forgive you. And Emery tells, that's when Emery tells Nesta about them being healed. And we learn that the baby is named Nyx, which is so fitting. And Cassian asks Nesta, like, if her powers are gone. And Nesta tells him that she thinks the mother intervened from the cauldron, taking all of it, but she did give most of it back in exchange for learning how to save Nesta, or learning how to save Feyre. And she says, I made some changes to myself too. And he's like, you want a baby? She's like, no, I'm taking my birth control. But, like, eventually I want a baby. And he asks, like, what do you want, Nesta? And she says, I want a disgustingly ornate mating ceremony. And he's like, Moore and Azriel will never let me live that down. And she's like, okay, well, here's this stale biscuit I stole from the room, and offer it. And he's like, so I either get to have, like, a over-the-top wedding or a stale biscuit.
Pretty much.
And she's like, well, that's the ritual, isn't it? And he's like, you can have, like, whatever you want, basically. So Cassian goes to meet Eris, and Eris tells him that, you know, Baron knows that he helped out. He didn't tell Baron anything about Bree Allen because really Eris didn't know much. But Baron tortured Eris. Like, he wasn't happy that Eris was saved. He's like, I'm going to torture you to find out what you know. And Cassian's like, that's really shitty. Like, that's messed up. And Cassian just asks Eris, like, Eris, why did you leave Moore in the woods that day? And Eris says, why do you guys care about this so much? Like, it was 500 years ago. Why did we keep talking about it? And Cassian says, because she's my sister and I love her. And Eris says, well, I didn't know Illyrians had sex with their sisters. I was like, yeah, that's kind of awkward, Cassian. I don't know. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you should say that, but okay. But Cassian just says, like, it doesn't add up. Like, the math is not mathing. He's like, you go against your father, but then you leave Moore in the woods. Like, I don't get it. And Eris says, you're not the one I want to give my truth to, and I doubt that she'll want to listen. Cassian tells Eris, you know, Eris, I think that deep down you actually are a good male. I think that you're just trapped in a bad situation. Back at the House of Wind, training has resumed. Actually, Cassian and Azriel made a list of all the mistakes that the girls made during the rite. And I would expect nothing less. Nesta and Cassian's mating ceremony is actually in 3 days. And she's like, Rhys will not stop buying me presents. And she finally had to tell him to stop and basically said, in exchange for your life, just give me a ridiculously over-the-top wedding. And so that's what he's doing. Basically, how the ceremony works is, like, they'll feed each other, and then they do these, like, really creepy things. So all of their friends will have their hands bound until they consummate their bond. First of all, as Nesta says, it's already been consummated. And what is, like, this old-timey obsession with knowing when people have sex? Like, I don't know why everyone else needs to know that. It's a very strange... The world doesn't need to know what they do. I don't care, personally. I would prefer not to know. Thank you for leaving me out of it. So, whatever. We also learned that Rhys has officially given Nesta and Cassian the House of Wind. And Feyre finally paints a picture of Nesta. It's her at the Pass of Analius, the breaking, where she was defending her friends, basically. And Nesta finally feels like she has a home for the first time in her life. So, after this, her and her sisters decide to take a walk one day, and they actually are taking the baby to their dad's gravesite. So first, Feyre and then Elaine go and talk to the headstone or whatever. Like, Feyre introduces the baby, and then they leave to give Nesta time. And Nesta doesn't have anything to say. She basically feels like she's like kind of let that go. But she does pull out like the carved rose that she had found in the cabin when her and Cassian went back and she had taken it. And she basically sets it down, and then she like kisses her hand and places it on top of his like gravesite and just says thank you. And then she looks up and Cassian is flying above her. And that is the end. We made it! So, I have questions and ratings. What did you rate this one?
I rated this one, let me see, at 4.5.
Yeah, that's what I gave it, was a 4.5. I've been meaning to ask this one, but I always forget. How many chili peppers did you?
I would say 4.5 as well.
Okay. I'll give it a 4. I feel like I've read some other stuff. But, yeah. It's spicy.
Yes.
It's not a doorknob, but hey.
No. Or a were-turkey.
Oh my gosh. I cannot.
You know what? I forgot about those for a second.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, please ask us, because we can't wait to tell you. So thoughts. Okay. In general, what did you think?
I really freaking enjoyed this one.
Yeah.
Honestly, out of the whole series so far, it's probably my second favorite.
Okay.
My first being ACOTAR. Yeah.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it. I was, at first I was like, okay, Nesta and Cassian, whatever. Don't like Nesta, but... And then by the time I was done with this, I was like, I love Nesta.
Yeah.
I mean, she definitely had a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And just didn't know how to deal with it, with anything, and she took it out on everybody else, which is not okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be in a bad mood, to be hurt, to be angry. It's not okay to take it out on other people.
Yeah.
I love this though. Love it so much.
Yeah. Nesta, like, get out of your own way. Yeah, that's your, like, that's how most people feel. People either like love or hate this, and like most people went into it not liking Nesta, and then like just like relating and like understanding her so much more, because it is just like sad, and like she just hated herself so much, and like she just could not get out of her own way. Like she's very stubborn, and I like relate with that so much. Sometimes I feel like I'm in my own way that way, like, shut up, Dominique. It's like, you don't have to say that. But it's like, I can't. Like, I just can't help myself. And it's like, I get it. So, I'm glad that she acknowledged it. Because, yeah, like, I think, like, yeah, she was a really crappy person. Like, that, like, all that stuff with Feyre. Like, it really was. And, like, even with Cassian. And Cassian's so, like, aww. And, like, their banter, I love it. Like,
loved it so
they're
much.
so, like, it's so good. I do. But she has a lot of, like, I like her and Asriel's relationship. Like, I think she needs that. I like her having friends, because I feel like,
I do too.
Like, Feyre doesn't really have, I know they try to make, like, her and, like, more, but I don't feel like that's real. Like, it's not, like, the same, or, like, it's not as organic as this was.
More so Feyre and, like, just gravitating just around
Yeah,
Rhys.
like, we're just, like, all here for Rhys, and, like, so.
Not having real friendships with others.
Yeah.
Outside
so
of, that.
All these people that are, like, organically here. Like, you guys were already here before me, so, like, if I left, like, I don't think you would go with me. So, like, yeah, I definitely agree. And it's, I don't know. I'm so ready for the next. I have no idea what the next book is. Like, I think I don't know.
Feeling, and I am not entirely excited if this is what it is, but they are hinting a lot at more.
Well, there's a lot about more, and nobody likes more. I think the next one's supposed to be Elaine's book, and I'm really worried about it because, like, I don't see her not, which is like my next thing. So obviously, her and Lucian are like not, but I just, I don't know. Like, there's so many ways like it can go. So, that's what I meant to talk about. You haven't read the bonus chapters, have you?
I don't think so.
I can just tell you what they are, but there's bonus chapters. So, in the bonus chapter, essentially, Azriel tries to give Elaine a necklace for Solstice.
Okay. I've not read these, so okay, go ahead.
So Azriel tries to give Elaine this necklace after hours. Reese is pissed because he's like, stay away from Elaine. Like, she has a mate, and regardless of whatever it is, like, stay away. Azriel's upset because he's like, why is it that, like, the cauldron blessed, like, my brothers basically with these two sisters and, like, did not give me one or whatever. Like, they almost even, like, have a kiss, basically. And, like, Reese, like, Reese is, like, on the stairs, like, in the dark, like, Azriel, like, come to my office. So, like, he doesn't give it to her. And then he gives the necklace to Gwen.
Okay. I've been seeing a lot about a re-gifted necklace.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So, I don't love either of those relationships. I'm so worried about this next book because I don't like Elaine. And I know I didn't like Nesta, so I'm like, okay, maybe she'll make me like Elaine. But I don't really care about Elaine and Lucian's story. So I'm like, and I don't know. Like, I don't see her end up with Azriel, and I don't want the story to be like, it starts out with them, and then, like, my little Azriel gets hurt and discarded to the side. Like, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that. So, yeah. There is, like, I don't know what, there has to be something about, everybody wants more about more, because at this point, she's kind of a throwaway character. There's just, like, random hints.
Yeah, the whole Baron or Eris. The whole Eris and War, like, she kept hinting at them too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
there's lots of other theories. So the thing about Elaine in the Spring Court, because, like, Cassian spent a whole paragraph talking about how she didn't belong in the Night Court. Like, black's on her color. Her drawer is obviously, like, flowers and stuff. But, like, so people are like, does she belong with Tamlin? Like, no. I just don't think that's true. But, like, there's all the speculation. Like, people think Tamlin's gonna die because they just think, like, he had a redemption arc, like that. And they, like, anybody can be the High Lord. So they think maybe it'll transfer to Lucian and then they'll end up over there. I don't know. But obviously, like, I feel like that's where she needs to end up. I don't know.
It suits her personality.
Yeah. I just don't know. But, like, I have no idea how she's gonna, like, bring this back together after this. I don't know. I'm worried. I'm concerned. I actually think there's 2 more books. I don't know. But yeah, more. I don't love more. So I'm like, but she's like sneaky. Like, she's got all this stuff going on. So I'm like, I guess we'll have to go down that road eventually. I guess. I don't know. So, yeah. I think I forgot because I was like, I think I put them at the end of my Frost and Starlight notes, and I was like, wrong book. I'm trying to see if it's back there. Okay, no, I just took it out of there. Okay, yes. So, I think that was it on my questions. Is that it? I think so. Okay, so our next book is, I don't know. I gotta look.
Is it Invisible Sun?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. We talked about that
Kim Johnson.
Hours ago. Yeah, what Keely said. It's Invisible Sun by Kim Johnson. I'm slap happy at this point. Yeah, so that is our next book. Anything else? I don't think so. Oh, I don't know if you want to read a review or not.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Let's go with a 5-star.
I'm very curious what the 1 star says.
Yeah, I'm excited about the 1 star.
I want to know what it says.
This book made me cry like 10 times until I hurt my eyes and I had to put a hot pack on them. No, my eyes are not swollen from crying. What? Okay, and then she just started rambling.
Oh, it started out so good.
Yeah. Okay. Trisha said, Maas does this super unique and awesome thing where she blends mental health and romance into a story that makes you want to cry and scream for joy all at once. I love this book and Nesta's story. So, now if we go to 1 star, there were 9,000 1-star ratings.
Oh, so much to say. I look at review things sometimes and I get intimidated. Like, I don't know what to say. I can't put my thoughts together cohesively.
Okay. Tanny said, 1 star. As someone who used to enjoy her books, this is such a massive disappointment. I usually don't rate the books that I DNF, but this one takes a cake. Thanks, SJM, for ruining Nesta. Hashtag Nesta deserves better. F Cassian, F Reese, F Amron, F Elaine. They can rot for all I care.
Dang.
Well, that makes sense for a DNF.
Ouch.
Because that turns around.
I mean, I want to know at what part she stopped.
Right.
How far did we get? Like 10%? 20%? That was painful. Well, okay. Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, there's that.
Okay. Well, as always, make sure you're following us on all the socials. So, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Retrospective, and check out our website, retrospective.com. And I think that's it.
That's all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.